When I sort of got asked to come on this podcast, I thought, what sort of session am I going to show? And you can see it's got Grimsby Town badge in the background, but I've got sort of three different, I'd just call them practices that you could either link together for different things. Now, you could do all three of these from a defending point of view or from an attacking point of view, or I'm working with the midfielders and I'm going to do this for this particular thing. And I think that's really important to mention. So can I go through the practices? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Let me know if I'm going for too long as well, because
I'm sure you've got bits to jump in on with him as well.
So the first practice there is like for 5 players ideally, but you can obviously, I've set them up with like 4 boxes if you've got 20 or if you've got 15, or you can adapt the numbers. But the basic principle is there's an overload in the middle and an overload on the outside. So in the middle, you play 2 versus 1 with 2 red defenders against the 3 attackers, where the 2 at the top can go up and down the line that are like support players, and the 1 in the middle can go anywhere in the middle box. So the idea of the game is that to score, and I think this is really important, the blue players need to play through the player in the middle to get the ball up to the top, or they can play straight through up to the top. So what that does with the 2 defenders in the middle is they're not just running around trying to man mark the guy in the middle. They've got to do 2 jobs. So screen the pass and also intercept. Does that make sense? So I think that's really important. So I've worked on this practice. For example, I did it the other week with the midfielders. We were getting split with passes a little bit too easily, the 3 in the midfield. So we set this up with them. This was a midfielder specific session. I think it was in the afternoon maybe, or might have been in the morning, while the assistant coach had the strikers doing something else, and I had one of the other coaches doing the defenders. I worked on this with, I think I had 10 players. I got some from the youth team as well. So we worked on the 2 in the middle purely on doing 2 jobs: screening the forward pass and being in a position to intercept and get in front of that 1 player. So it was purely a defending theme, although there's plenty of passing and receiving in it. There's plenty of movement. There's plenty of combination play, and there's plenty of transition. So I play this where the ball always goes back into the Blues anytime the ball goes out. But when the defenders win it, they play 2v1 and try and get to an amount of passes against the 1 defender in the middle. Also, I've added goals on the outside. So if the defenders win it, bang, they counter-attack, boom, and try and pass it out, which is really what they'd want to do in the game. And I reckon I've been doing this practice for, I reckon, roughly about since 2006 or 7, I reckon, and I still use it now religiously. Not every week, but we use some form of it quite regularly, whether it's a technical warm-up, you can do it unopposed as well. But I think it's a real good practice where you can get a lot out from. Does that make sense, guys? Any sort of questions on that? Like I use that often, but in an attacking or a defending type of way.
Which I think are real keys for anybody, because again, we've mentioned there'll be people with different, working with contact to their players, similar level to yourself and less, and some people that probably won't have players any more than an hour a week. So with that in mind, and what sort, I know you have got the timings at the bottom here, but how often do you put that session in? I know you mentioned you don't do it every week, but
I think we do. I think we do that twice a month.
Brilliant.
Twice a month. Yeah. And now, even if you were say you were working with a team twice a week, you do your warm up. This could be a 5-minute practice you do once a week.
Yeah.
Just to get your players going, to get touches of the ball, to get your attacking out, to get your defending out, and you can just change it and adapt it every week. I mean, the team I'm at the moment, TNS, we had to really build the training mentality. It wasn't competitive. It was quite light. It was quite easy. It just wasn't aggressive enough for me. And we needed to, having lost the league for the last 2 years, we needed to get at it every day. So what we did was we went in the gym to do activation, which is what everyone does now to switch on the right muscle groups, etc. Then the minute we come out on the pitch, we didn't do the warm up first. We do boxes first.
Yeah.
We'd have 2 in the middle and we'd be at it from the start. And we've done that virtually every session, every day since I've been here for a year, just because I felt that was the best mentality to get the players on it, because the warm up sometimes is a bit slow. It's a bit labored. You might be able to get the ball in there as well, of course, but the players get the box out. We do it for 5 to 10 minutes religiously every day. We film it as well. They're on it every day with different progressions, and we might put small target goals around it. And that's sort of a little version of a box there. And for this group of players, I just found that's what got them going. when I come in there. So that's an example of like to start with a practice that it's like an old school arrival activity, Jamie, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those all arrival activities at the FA. I'm doing them with first team senior players. I think it's important to recognise that.
You see a lot of rondo type stuff, coaches using rondos, but when the defenders win it, the game's over. It's dead. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I like the transition bit to it, which when you give the ball away, you work hard to win it back. Which
and we have a thing when we're doing the rondo, so we'll have 20 passes, the two are in the middle again. But if the two win it in the middle and they pass it to the outside, they play to the outside, they get to the outside quickly, the next two that come in are on 10 passes. Yeah. So you're not just kicking it out the box, you're winning it, transitioning it, getting yourself out. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then once you've played that out, then you've got to go away from the ball and make it bigger as well. So I think that transition is so important, and mixing it up with like target goals when defenders win it back. Because what you find is even with the first team players, but with the kids, who wants to be a defender? No one wants to be a defender. But if you get to score a goal as a defender, that's a bonus, isn't it? And then kids will start defending because they like defending.
Yeah.
And they always think about what do the defenders do when they win it. I think is so important.
I think one of the major points that I would take from what you've just mentioned is the key to inspiring the players to hooking people at the start of a session is no different to using the phrase that you both just used there of an arrival activity for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
As well as doing exactly the same thing with senior players, albeit you've manipulated the session to suit the standard and to hook the players that you're working with. So yeah. I think the principles there show that, and going right back to the conversations we had at the beginning about what you learn from working with the 3 and 4 year olds, is that you got to get them on side straight away, and clearly Definitely. You want to inspire your players, and this has worked on that front. I've got a couple of questions around some of your sessions, but maybe go on to the next one. And
yeah, sure. So the practice 2 is a bit more of a really, it's a transition possession. I'm sure we've probably seen before, but I thought it was important to get some little details out there because, like we say, anybody can copy a session and do it, but why do you know why you're doing it? What are you doing in there? And what's the reason for it? So really there I've put 2 midfielders in the middle. There's 2 teams of 6. So the ball goes into one side and they're playing a 6v3 overload. If they get, depends how many passes you want to do, 6 to 8 passes, they transition through the middle players and then the ball goes out to the other side. And then the 3 players come back across and then the 3 defenders come in and then they defend. So a simple transition practice, but I think there's a few key bits that are different in there. Normally with these ones, you'd pass back or you'd get to 8 passes, then another ball would be served in. But like you guys you're talking about there, Jamie, about you've got to play into a midfielder who's in an area in between people. The opposition team can then obviously, once they make the 8 passes, they could go and press, but then they could also come in and screen, which creates a different thing, which is good for us in the Welsh League because we have a lot of possession. So we have to break down a low block quite regularly. So you can work on that with that. I've got I've put the goals in the corner as well because you can add into it when the defenders win it, they score in the goal and then get the ball back. So you get a goal for winning it also too. But I've done that with pressing in numbers, transition of regaining to get the ball, keeping possession, but then also playing away from small areas. So sometimes with the rondos, they're not always directional, so you've got to be careful. But this originally, if you think about it, you serve the ball in 6v3, you make your passes, then it's got to be directional. So when do you risk that pass? The risk and retain, I think, comes into it as well. So that practice, again, similar, probably twice a month we would do that or a version of that. And also to drive tempo and to also get the physicality out of it as well. Depending on the timings, we link in with the S&C coach. Obviously, we were able to do that now, but to get the physical elements out of that, we would do this pre-season as well, but in bigger areas if we needed bigger area work. So I think that's real key. One bit I wanted to mention on here as well is that on those 2 practices, I've got the coach there with the ball serving it in. I'd say probably, I reckon, 5 or 6 years ago, I just stripped down every single practice I did and just asked myself, like, how do you start the practice? And because I'm quite like energetic, I love to drive the tempo, I'm quite vocal in the sessions, I found out I was on the ball, passing the ball in on just about every session I had. And I'm like, that's great for some ways where you have to control the tempo and you want to serve it in yourself. But then other ways you can't get round and coach, or you can't see things from a different angle, or the players are always receiving a pass from you, or you're missing things as you're passing it in. So I think it's key to, do you get other people to serve the balls in for you? Where do the balls start? Like on that practice there, the second one, I've put balls at the top and at the bottom of the practice. So the players, they've got to then go and get the ball, and you can wander around and see things from different angles. And yeah, it only took me about 10 years of coaching to work that out. Do you know what I mean? But like, how much of a basic thing is that I just overlooked for all those years because, yeah, I'm a good coach and I'm serving it in and I'm driving it. Players are loving it. But I worked out that, yeah, do you know what? I had to strip all that back. And even like I was working on defending topics, and the defenders were always in good shape to start with. So I switched it around, and we started, if it was a defending topic, you'd start attacking first, then go into your defending bit, and vice versa. Attackers going into defending and round the other way. So I really sort of challenged that about 4 or 5 years ago, and thought that's important to think about where you're starting on those two practices. It just so happens that probably the best thing to do is to start it yourself. But on the third practice, I've got a different start position that I stole from someone else and still use now. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do, and I think sometimes as well, when you're the server, it becomes so random for the players. You sort of almost at times, you're so infused in trying to get everyone at it and the tempo up that your service becomes unpredictable, and you end up looking for someone who might be in a space to receive it, rather than the session actually starting from a bit of a natural position, or people to take up more suitable positions to receive the ball. One of the questions I've got related to this session were two of them. One is the timings you mentioned about pre-season, but how the timings in which you let the session run for. Is it? I'm quite religious by the stopwatch, and probably too much at times where I don't let a session flow because it's flowing. It stops because the 2 minutes are up. So that's one of those, and that might be something that's related to all your sessions, not just the one that we're talking about. The other thing that I would ask as well is, with those two red players that are in the middle, are they always midfielders, or is that something where you might get someone in there, especially working with younger players that might need to receive with their back to goal, or you might want to get them working on the half turn or opening their body out and back foot, all the whatever way in which we phrase it, that you can manipulate the players in that position, I suppose.
For sure. I mean, for an example there, using that exact session, we had a right back at Southampton who struggled technically, or not so much technically necessarily, but he was playing right back, and obviously you're up against a touchline type position, but he needed just an overall general awareness. So he was one of our better players, but we actually moved him in to play midfield for 1 month. So we put him in this practice quite regularly, doing these sorts of things with that 360 degrees that he needed. And then what happened was, when he went to play right back, he did a lot better because he'd always played right back because he was the best player. So I think you got to look at that. Like, we had a big thing about you look after your best players, but you make sure they're getting challenged in the session. Now, moving him from right back to centre midfield wasn't the best thing for the team, because boy did he struggle at the start. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, wait, what are you moving him in there for? But there's a good example there, Ross, of working with a younger player who you'd think, it's not necessarily the midfielders, but you could put him in there for that reason, to work on that. Although he might not be receiving and playing through as often, it just worked on his overall awareness. And I think it really helped him. And with practices like this, we would think about, what's he doing? I remember Connor, what's he doing in this session? Does he need to go in and do that? Because what he would do is, where would he stand in this session if he's on that team? Where would he stand?
He's the one on the ball now, isn't he?
He's the one on the ball in the corner like that every single time. Do you know what I mean? So, and in this as well, I'd encourage, you talk about your rondos and getting people in the middle, get your midfielder, or not necessarily just your midfielder, but they go and link the play through the middle. Don't be standing on the sideline all the time. So I think you got to think about those things. I think it's a really good question. What was the first one on there? The timings.
I just think, like I say, I'm too set in my ways of, right, this session drill period of whatever it is that we're working on is done on the clock for 2 minutes. And I'm not good enough at times of letting it flow because it's flowing, or it's not, and it needs to be dragged out a little bit longer. I stick to the stopwatch a lot. It's just something that I do or have done. So I think it's just interesting for people to know how long you might let that go for. You watching pre-season when you might have different outcomes, and actually the technical and tactical, if you like, side of the session gets.
Well, I think we have a sort of a bit of a thing, and I'm not sure this is right, by the way, but the session's either for the players or it's for the coaches. So if it's a coach session and I go, right, I really want to work on say defensively, we're working on the 3 players pressing to regain the ball back quickly, but then they've got to drop in and get some shape. I'll speak to the S&C coach and say, we're going to do a block of work for, say, 20 minutes total from start to finish. I'm going to get 3 rough drinks break stops in there. But when I see things in this session, bang, I'm going to jump in and coach. And it might be a bit of old school stop, stand still. Where could you be? You might need to move here. You might need to go there. Stop during the drinks break. What are we doing well here? What could you improve on? And we don't have a time for it, but we know roughly we're going to coach for 20 minutes or it's going to flow for 20 minutes. Now, we've got the GPS, obviously, which is obviously a great thing to use. And you can go back and refer to that. And if we haven't got enough from that session, the next day we can top up and do extra or do less if we go too hard. Other days, though, we'll go, right, this practice is just purely competitive because we actually keep the scores in training of who wins and who loses in training on certain sessions, on small-sided games and possessions. So even the players ask now, they go, oh, are we keeping the score for this game? So if I'm keeping the score in this game, I'm not stopping it and going in and coaching because they'll kill me, the players. They just want to play and they want to know what the score is. So then I can be real prescriptive and go, we are doing 3 lots of 2 minutes on this and I'm absolutely bang on the clock. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll be with the S&C coach and I'll give him that look and he knows that look and that'll be like, we're going one more, aren't we? I'm like, we're going one more, we're doing it again. And he's not happy, but sometimes you got to go with the feel. And I'm a big believer you have to adapt as you go there. Even though there's the statistics or whatever say you have to do this, sometimes you have to go with your gut, and sometimes you get it wrong. I mean, of course, but I'm learning to get better at that and getting the S&C coach's advice and going with that. So I think that's the big thing for me. Is it for the players, and I'm not sure that's the right terminology, but is it for the players or is it for the coaches? And if it's for the coaches, then we might not have as much time on it. That's just what I find works, or tends to work so far, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. And then if you just want to move on to that.
Yeah, practice 3 is, and I think this was a really important one to put in because it was a start position. I got this from, I can't remember who I got the start position from, but someone from West Ham, I think, was that you've got the red players are the defenders and the 2 defenders really want a 3v2 overload. But normally when you'd start this practice, the attackers would start, they'd pass the ball, or sometimes the defenders would start and pass the ball out to the 3 attackers, and then the 2 defenders would be standing there and the 3 attackers would attack them. And I never really felt like the look was that good and right. And I've done it for years and years. You've got the 2 small target goals at the back for the defenders to score, or the goalkeeper to get and throw in. And obviously the 3 attackers are trying to score in the big goal against 2. But the start position I saw was great, and I've used it ever since, even with the first team players now. There's one defender on the ball. He plays across to the other defender. You can do it a couple of different ways. Either he can take it off him in a changeover, or he can bounce it back to him. And he has a shot at his own goalkeeper. Now, obviously, he wouldn't be doing that in the game. But what it does is one has the shot and the other one follows in. So the minute that happens is then the next attacker serves the ball into themselves, the attackers, then they're attacking. So think about from a defending point of view, the one who shot has had the shot and he's off balance, then he's got to turn and get back up to the ball. And the one who's following in follows in the shot, obviously deals with that. Then he's getting back up outside the box, up to the ball as much as he can. So the different start position. And look, I did this with the kids at West Ham for years, because who wants to be a defender? Well, what's the session? What's the session, coach? Well, the session is the defenders get a free shot at the start. Yeah, I'll be the defender. Even now, the defenders love this. I've got centre backs who buzz over this, because when you think about it, we asked the centre backs in the first team to go up for set plays and corners, and then when your 6'2" centre back smashes it over the bar, you go, "Oh, what's he doing? What's he doing?" But when do you ever work on him on shooting? So like that's a little bit of it there. So he plays in, he gets the shot, then he comes back up, and they keep their score that way. The way I've started it before with the 3 attackers is that the middleman plays the man to the right or the left, and then he gets round him on the overlap and the other guy drives inside. So similar to what I've said before, chaps, as in I've worked on it with attackers, I've worked on it with defenders and different themes. It could be on the clock. It could be from a fitness thing. I normally serve in 3 balls to the attackers. So the defenders have 1 ball to shoot and score, and the attackers have 3 balls before that game's dead. And then 2 new defenders come in most of the time because it is quite taxing on the defenders. And you might have more attackers waiting on the sideline. But I think it's a real good practice, can manipulate the size and the areas of it. But an example of not starting it from the area. But I'd always in this keep an offside line at any age within reason when you're playing offsides. I think that's so important because defensively, defenders need to be able to get up to the ball and defend properly, etc.
I suppose one of the things it adds to your attackers as well is it gives them a big chunk or period of time in order to gain territory on the defenders with that shot that you've encouraged as well.
Well, see, that's it. And depending on your age and range and what you want to do, depends how close that is to them. Do you want that inside the 18-yard box? Yeah. Do you want that line there to be, that might be 12 yards out. So it's really emergency defending, or attacking wise, you might want it a little bit wide. So it forces them wide to get down the outside, to get your cutback crosses in, or to finish on the angle themselves. So I think you can really change the size of that. I've done it really big, but done it quite small as well.
I think it just highlights it even just changing the start position, how it can affect the whole practice, or where you shoot from. If you shoot closer, then there's obviously the distance to try and cover afterwards. It just changes the whole thing about the session.
Definitely,
but I think interestingly for me, and probably something to share with coaches, is just play around with start positions. Have a go. There's not really a right or wrong, but the start position will change the session. And I think like you've mentioned, just distances change just on that. And
that's what I'm talking about there is a lot of, and I hope I don't offend anyone here if they're watching it, but I think there's a lot of like social media coaches now who put their session, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. If there's people listening who do it, you guys might do it yourselves, Jamie, but putting their sessions on social media, but then maybe not explaining how they would do it enough, or working on that session enough. And it looks great on the paper. This looks great on the paper, but there's so many things that can go wrong with this. There's so many things you would change. There's even things I'm looking at here now that I'd look at the distance, and I should have done that start position on the 3 attackers better. It doesn't really highlight, because look at that attacker on the left. He's just running in a straight line at that defender.
Yeah, I was going to say that. His movement.
I'm just looking at him now going, what is he doing there? So I think that's important, that you're not just throwing your sessions out there. I think practicing and working on them. And like I say, all 3 of these sessions, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've done them, but I do repeat them a fair bit, I must say, whether it's with a whole group, whether it's we use this with the strikers, but bring in the youth team to be the defenders sometimes. So we match up the first team strikers against the youth team defenders. So we're constantly working on our attackers against the youth team defenders, and the youth team coaches coaching the defenders while I'm coaching the attackers type thing. Or do it the other way around, or do it with all your attackers, all your defenders on the clock to get your physical elements out of it. So, but I think practicing those sessions over and over again, you'll learn something from that every single time, Jamie and Ross, won't you? Do you know I mean? I'm sure you've got sessions learning constantly from.
One of the things that just jumped out at me is that I was talking to a coach the other day, and he was saying about his under 9s or 10s, whatever they were, need to work on their throw-ons. And I remember thinking, I'm not so sure I'd turn up and work on throw-ons in a training session. There's a lot more other things that I think are important, but we've been talking about start positions there. I'm not sure there's too many wrong start positions that you can take up, whether it's you as a coach starting in the middle and feeding balls to people, or as you mentioned previously, the balls being in a position for the players to go and get it. But this would be an ideal opportunity for someone to be stood on the side taking a throw on as one of the 3 balls.
Well, I think you're right. There's no wrong ones, but do you know why your session is starting, or the practice is starting from that position? And that took me many years to realize that. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't believe I hadn't really thought of it in the detail I did until I looked at every practice and went through it. Yeah. I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I been doing for all these years, honestly? But sometimes you miss the basic bits of it, don't you? Like we go into the detail with our sessions, as in when we plan a week in advance, the rough structure of the sessions, we plan the day before the session. So I always like to go to bed that night knowing what we're doing the next day, but we have a 9:15 meeting in the morning before we start training at 10:15, 10:30. But we'll be detailed of who's getting the balls in, where are the balls going, where are the drinks in the session, where are the stoppages, where are the players going to go to each part. I think they're the basic organization things, even if, and I probably learned that from my time of working on a quarter of an Astro with 30 kids, having like, this is the start of a session, then I'm going here, then I'm moving these 2 cones without moving this, and then I'm putting the goals here, and what's the quickest way to move these goals to the next practice? You guys are nodding your head there because I'm sure we all do it. So it's not just like we've got all the area we can and all the equipment, it's easy. I'm still thinking about those things now that I had to do when I had 30 kids in a classroom of half a hall and trying to manage the equipment and stuff. I think that's so important and can't be underestimated, really.
And I think they're important things, and I think it's great that it's come out so often this evening, is that those messages are so very difficult sometimes to put across to people, that those transitions within a session, and I mean transitions from one bit to another, are still important when you're going to lose the attention of a 6-year-old, as they are to making sure that there's a flow with the first team players. And I think sometimes people can think, no, he works with men, so that bit's going to be easy, but men are just as liable to volley a football at the crossbar as a 6-year-old will be. So, and I think all them considerations are things that people probably wouldn't consider.
Also, as well, with your numbers, I think is so key. Like, you think, with first team, you know exactly what you're doing. But I remember times at Southampton taking the 18s, and one time I think Ronald Koeman sent someone over and just went, I need the back 4. And you're like in the middle of your session. So I've got the session plan there. I'm ready to go. I'm working with these players. I've got like 18 or whatever, a great number. And his assistant comes over and goes, I need that back 4. I need a back 4. And I'm like, right, okay, you go over. And then the players are looking at me and I'm like, right, yeah, let's do you know what I mean? Let's go. So I think without all those working with the 3 and 4-year-olds, then going and working with first team players on a Tuesday, Thursday night, or all those different sessions, working in the classroom as we did there, Jamie, with 30 kids in a hall with a piano and the Christmas tree, helped me be more adaptable for those moments and at least pretend like I knew what I was doing when those 4 players left, and I knew what I was going to do next. So I think that's so important.
I think at the time when them things happen, you go, what am I going to do? But it's only later on do you look back and go, actually, that I am real flexible and adaptable as a coach as a result of all them challenges that you're just thrown in at the deep end. And because there's not many players that we go, I've got an idea, I know what we could do. They just look at you and right, now what we're doing, and you're like, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,